Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LeanTossup Call of Duty League podcast. There's actually some big news this week we're going to talk about. My name is Robert, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, CDLMetrics. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing okay. I have come down with an illness this week, so apologies if I don't sound like my usual self. I probably won't do a ton of talking this week, but I'm getting better. I'm on the mend. Hopefully by this weekend I'll be all good to go. But yeah, excited as always. We got a lot of good COD last weekend. It seems that the top four is still the top four, so not a big surprise
Shocker.
there. Yeah, this week we'll have, I don't know, a lot of games that we'll talk about that I think won't be competitive whatsoever. And then we have a few here and there that look decent. We'll see how those go. But you're right, we do have some major news to talk about. So looking to hear what you have to say on that, because it's juicy. And I'm sure everyone knows by now what it is.
Yeah, let's get into that. But one quick thing I will say is that I just want to hit on the maps because we're not going to talk about that. But 6-star is amazing. It is like restoring my love of Hardpoint. Just straight up. Literally, I was so sick of seeing the same shade of brown in all the Hardpoints, and now it's different and it's cool. And I really like the new map, so I'm really happy about that. Anyway, news of the week. This is extremely important. This is actually probably the biggest news we have covered on this podcast because, again, we did not technically start. We started about a year into the CDL. We started with Cold War, right? So this is technically actually the biggest news we have covered because we were not here for the start of the CDL. Just a quick recap. Obviously, many people have heard it, but just a quick recap as well. Outstanding entry fees will be eliminated. Any fees previously collected from teams will be returned in full. So apparently, while they hadn't been paying it, payments could have started again. And I think they realized that had they started collecting payments, that would have meant the end of the league. So they're like, we're done with that, and we're permanently removing this obligation while also injecting capital back in the league. So the teams are going to get paid back the money that they paid. So they actually didn't pay a lot of money because they were only paying for a couple months, and then COVID happened, and then payments were suspended. And I don't know. I'm not sure exactly how much money they're getting back, but it seemed as though they said that league spots were 25 million and teams were like, we're getting 27, like we owed 27 million. So somehow it went up. I don't know what, I mean, it's not clearly not loan shark there, but I don't know what interest rate that is. It doesn't seem like a great interest rate they were getting there. But anyways, the next major point is teams will earn increased revenue tied to the sale of their in-game merchandise, for example, the team bundles, and now champs bundles as well. Was there a champs? Oh no, there was a champs bundle last year, right? I think there was, right? Yeah, there's usually a champs bundle, but whatever. It's something gold, right? So basically, they're gonna get a cut of that sale as well. Also, it's going to recognize that hosting large-scale events are vital to teams and the CDL community. So basically, they're saying that they're going to provide a fund, or basically a subsidy to teams organizing live in-person events such as majors, opens, and champs. Interesting there. The inclusion of one word in that sentence is extremely interesting. Opens. Did not have to say that word, did not have to be in that sentence, but it is, and that means something. And teams will receive a 2-year minimum guarantee of revenue so they can continue investing in the Call of Duty League with more peace of mind. That one is also fascinating, getting glossed over, but it means that, hey, we're going to exist for at least 2 more years. So that's an interesting take on it as well. Obviously, I've said a couple of things on there. What are your first thoughts? When you saw this, what was the first thing that went through your mind here?
My first thought was hopefully this is the first positive step in a long line of needed changes to the league. And we've talked about it for years at this point that there are a lot of issues with the CDL. A big reason why they still exist is because of money, right? Activision has a ton of money they can put on this league. They realize that there is a demand for competitive COD, a very high demand, I would say. So they want this league to exist, and we all want it to exist. But it felt for the last couple years, okay, if we're not getting these changes, you're going to lose fans, you're going to lose viewership. Some teams we've already seen have cut their rosters just to save money. So there are a number of issues. I think this is one major step in the right direction, and hopefully, again, we will see continued progress as we get into this off season. I'm sure we'll get a bunch of news because I can't imagine the COD League would have this giant news drop and then say, like, all right, let's pat our hands dry. I think we solved everything. I think they know. We need to figure out the rest of this. And as you said before, like including the word opens in that third line there goes to show that, like, hey, we are down for maybe adding some open tournaments. And we've had some, like I think last year we had one where it was like a pro-am tournament. So open, but you still had to qualify if you were one of the amateur teams. But yeah, maybe we'll see opens in the future. Who knows? Right now, at least we know teams are getting a lot of cash back that they've already put into the league, and they will be getting more revenue, right? Based on team bundle sales or merchandise sales or whatever. If you put on events, right, in person, like the CDL will help you out with that even more. I know that was a big barrier, I think, for a lot of teams is like it costs a lot to run a team. Put on top of that you want to host an event, and you really whittled down the pool of teams that were willing to host. Toronto is a team that has had a lot of success, a lot of cash, it seems. They've been willing to put on events. Optic is a giant brand, obviously. They've been willing to put on events. But you see some big names like FaZe. They've put on one event since the CDL has existed, and that was like the second or third event in 2020 before the world ended. And that was a year where every team had to put on at least one event in person. So we haven't been back to Atlanta since then. And FaZe have been like the face of the league since its existence. So hopefully this will encourage all teams to try to put together some in-person events, because if you can put your brand on the map with something like a live LAN or open or whatever, that's good. And if the CDL is going to help you with that's even better. So yeah, hopefully we'll see more interest in outside organizations wanting to come in. I know expansion is something you care a lot, about, Robert. I think there's a realistic shot we get more teams into the league next year because of this news. I think outside orgs are seeing these changes and going, maybe it's worth it to have a CDL team now. Maybe we want in on this now that we see these changes. Interested to see how that all shakes out. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think huge step in the right direction, but hoping for more good news in the not too distant future.
Yeah, pretty much agree with everything you said. I have a couple more pieces to add in there as well. Again, huge change, huge step in the right direction, but one of needed steps. Does this fix every problem in the Call of Duty League? No. This fixes 30% of them, yes, but there's more that needs to be fixed. I think fundamentally the problem with this league stems from the initial creation of it, and I think that's a large part of the problem, and that's what this is trying to fix. I think if you think we were kind of like, okay, that's it, this league is folding, it's done, and that was like the first thing I kind of thought of. I'm like, okay, we were all like pretty sure this was it, this was done, right? Why would Overwatch League died? There's a very real sense of they're just keeping the lights on until something happens. It's really weird as like, why did this not just die? And I was thinking about it, and I think they realized that Riot Games, obviously they own Valorant, they own League of Legends, they keep those within themselves, and I think there was a desire, especially from within Microsoft, to say, we have this now, yes, you guys screwed this up, but having the brand of Call of Duty, which is arguably should be the biggest esport, it arguably should be, we want to keep that, right? Because the thing is, if you think about it, like the game that does the most sales every year is Call of Duty. Of any game. It crushes anything. Basically a Call of Duty game, which is basically a reskin of the previous one, functionally, some changes or whatever. But it's always one of the most released games, one of the highest selling games, period. You've got developing studios that make games for years, and they would kill for a fraction of Call of Duty sales. And Call of Duty can churn that out every year, plus then billions more in microtransactions, right? There is a huge point of this that says, they said, no, this could potentially be the biggest esport. We're not letting it go. We're not going to let other people have it. We want a cut of this pie. And I think by doing this, you're accepting the fact that the people, because again, you have to remember there has been a transition of leadership here. The people at Activision who did this, they're gone. And I suspect that the people who did this today, the people who designed the league are gone. The people who did this change, they are the ones in charge now. And I think they said there is no way in hell we are letting a multi-billion dollars franchise's esport league go away. And I think there's a recognition that esports might not, people maybe been ahead of the time. They thought this was going to be the next NFL or whatever. And I think they said maybe we're not there yet, but we could be in 10, 15 years. And we have to think on a longer term scale rather than, okay, this isn't working right now, let's just get rid of it. And I think when you think about the original design, I think there was this kind of element, and it was like basically a cash grab. They went to a bunch of billionaire NFL owners and said, hey, you know what? You were smart, or for some of them, your dad was smart. They bought an NFL team for pennies, relatively to now, obviously. They bought this NFL team for super cheap. You could be in the ground floor of this. Call of Duty is the biggest video game franchise. You're getting an esport. This is like buying an NFL franchise for $25 million. It's a steal. You could flip this in 10 years for $1 billion, $2 billion, or just hold on to it, right? And I think that's when you think back to it, that makes a lot of sense for why this league was created in the first place. This was designed for billionaire owners to have a league spot. And I think part of the allure was, okay, your investment of 25 million will 4x, 10x, 100x, and then you can either hold it or flip it or whatever, right? I think that was the original design. And I think now there's acceptance that's not how that's going to work. And I actually think there's a chance that some of the leagues were just holding on. If you went to LAG and you said you sold this league spot for 25 million, you bought this for 25 million dollars, we'll buy it for you for 40 million. They would have sold. They're like, we're done, right? And I think there's a point of this where some of the owners, not so much Robert Kraft, I think he's holding on. I think some of the other ones are a bit better, but there is a clear sense from some of these teams that are like, if you bought me out, if I made a 2x return on this, I'm done. I'm gone. I don't care about this anymore. And I actually think there's a chance that some of those teams will say to this, okay, yeah, we don't care. We're done now. Whatever. We were in this just to triple our investment. We can't do that anymore, so we're gone. And that's actually okay because I would much rather have people who care about this. I think this does open the door for expansion. I think there's a lot of people who wanted to be in the COD League for the right reasons. They wanted to be in the CDL before, but they weren't able to because of the massive $25 million buy-in. Team War, for example, they were massively involved with Call of Duty before. They got shut out. They couldn't afford a $25 million buy-in. You excluded those people because you wanted to cater to billionaires, and they are now saying we're done here. And I think this is where this league is heading. I think there probably will be expansion because at this point there's no reason to not have expansion. If the entry fee is $0, then you may as well pick teams that you want. Basically at this point now, the whole point of franchising and the $25 million was basically building an NFL with Call of Duty. That is functionally dead now. So there's no reason Optic can't be Optic anymore. 100 Thieves can't be 100 Thieves anymore. Atlanta FaZe can't just be FaZe. There's no reason these teams can't just go back to being the teams they are. And like when you look at the Valorant League, they basically picked the people they wanted to create the teams with, and they basically said, we want you to have a team. We want G2. We want all these other orgs. And I think there's a big chance that they might come back to the table and say we need to do that. And this fixes some of the problems. There are a lot of other problems with the league. One of them is control, the entire game mode itself. There's a lot of problems, but this fixes a lot of them. And it tells us hey, you know what? Activision says, this is a big enough money for us. This is big enough money. It can be big enough. We're not letting someone else have this. And I think Activision, thought this was the NFL. And I think they said this is basically an NFL and we're going to make this the NFL. And I think they've now realized that they can't do that. At least not yet. Maybe in 10 to 15 years this can be the NFL, but it's not the NFL. And I think it is a huge step forward in the right direction. And I think there's going to be a lot of changes in the upcoming years. And I think I think this podcast and kind of anybody who covers the Call of Duty League in general might benefit from that. So I'm pretty excited. I think we need more information, obviously. This is a big first step, and this is a good first step. But I think this is the same feeling people had at the end of Black Ops 4. When we don't know what's about to happen next. We don't know what the Call of Duty League is going to bring. This is basically similar to announcing a brand new Call of Duty League. Now, there's going to be something in here because I suspect they're still going to want some level of control over the league itself. Because they're not just going to say, okay, all teams are equal now. A regular team is equivalent to a challenger's team. They're not going to do that exactly. There's going to be something else in here. But I think we're moving towards a lot better of a future here for Call of Duty rather than whatever, right? I think there is something this is going to be very interesting, and we need more information, but as of this point, I'm very intrigued. I think this could go very well, and I'm very happy to see where this goes. Anything else you want to add about this before we start talking about the games, or no?
Not really. I think we covered most everything. Yeah, just curious to see where we go from here and when we'll hear the next pieces of news that go along with this. It probably won't be until this off season, and hopefully we get some positive news regarding schedule changes, format changes, possible expansion, any of that stuff. But just know that I think it'll be at least a few months, maybe more, until we know more. So we'll see. But exciting nonetheless.
Yeah, agreed. Roster changes. Gunless and Standy in, Awakening and Vivid out. That actually happened last week, but it happened after we recorded. First results, not great. I think they went 0-2. They lost both games, I think, right? Yeah, they
Yeah.
lost to, I think it was FaZe, and then they lost to, who did they lose to on Sunday, I think?
New York. So it was, yeah, not a great first showing for that rocker squad. Yeah, the only thing we knew last week when we recorded was Vivid was out for sure. We had an idea Awakening would also be out, but we didn't include that because it wasn't guaranteed. And then sure enough, the day after we record, it's, hey, Standy's in, hey, Gunless is back. And yeah, got swept pretty easily by FaZe. And then they competed okay versus New York. They won one map and almost won map one as well. They fought pretty tough, but somewhat expected results. So we'll see how they fare against easier competition this week. And then, yeah, this week, Vegas Legion announcing Purge is out. And ASIM, who was previously on a Challengers team, and Boston Breach is now in. We'll see how things shake out for them. They went 1-1 last week, somewhat expected. I think they were probably favored in both of their matches, but not convincingly. So a 1-1 finish last week was nothing extraordinary or anything crazy, but interested to see how that team fares with ASIM in replacement. We'll get our first view of that team this weekend with that new roster.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty excited about this because this team always felt like it was good, but it was just missing something. And I feel like ASIM might actually be that piece. It's just they are missing that pop, and sometimes ASIM just has that pop, right? And I think they could, but again, right? And it's still, this is the same thing, and we talked about this last week. Of there needs to be a salary cap, and there needs to be stuff. The problem is, it's the top four are just too powerful, and you're fighting for fifth, and that's great, but that's it, right? You're fighting for fifth. You're not fighting for first or second. You're fighting for fifth place. But this is a team that can be fifth, right? And that's the thing. So it's actually pretty good that way. Major three qualifiers expected wins pre-week 2, so before week 2. FaZe and Ultra both looking very good. They play this week, Sunday night. Very exciting game there. I'm pretty excited for that game. Optic, they lost to FaZe 3-1. They are sitting at 5. They're basically subliners there at 4. Thieves somehow beat Legion. Not sure how that happened exactly, but they're up there as their 5th team right now. Miami, they beat Boston somehow. Not sure how that happened exactly. I was watching it and Boston was up 2-1. I'm like, this is looking pretty good. Just need to finish off a hard point, which you won already. And you clear out a 3-1. I cash a nice Boston money line, and I cashed a nice Boston minus 1.5. Went away for about an hour, and sure enough, they had lost 3-2. So I was a bit heartbroken by that one. And yeah, Legion there, they went 1-1 last week, and then Seattle obviously was able to beat Carolina. They beat Carolina, and showing that was like their only game of the week, right? Yeah, they're not bad. That was pretty good. They seem a little bit better now, but again, it's all relative to anything. Being the market and combined mall results, not great for me. You didn't have a great week either. You did cash this Miami versus Boston. I was on the other side of it, and yeah, that's unfortunate. Again, called the wrong Legion minus 1.5. And yeah, I thought maybe Minnesota could, and they did come close. They almost won the hard point, but I think it was a 3-0 in the end. Or no, it was 3-1, 3-1. They won the search, but Minnesota came very close. I think in both hard points actually. But yeah, rough week there for me. And the combined results did not do good, but they had Seattle there, so that's not bad. But we also didn't have a ton of plays on it either. Match previews. First match of the week: Carolina versus New York. Subliners minus 1200 the money line, minus 2.5 plus 125. 35.5 point favorites in the hard point, 2.5 round favorites in the search. Wow. And 1.5 round favorites in the control. I like the Carolina plus 2.5, but not a lot. Mostly, this is something I'm seeing. I'm gonna look at my model in this off week and think about it. But I just kind of think, look, I have subliners over 50% in all three matches. It's hard to justify buying a plus 2.5 at minus 175, right? Now, it's equally as hard to justify a minus 2.5 at plus 125, but it's really hard to justify. You're like, yeah, subliners are favored in all three games, but I find some slight value on the plus 2.5. It's very iffy. I don't particularly like it very much. This is mostly unbettable for me. I had this feeling last week, and I didn't bet Minnesota against FaZe for that reason. I bet FaZe in a clean sweep, so they're going to win all three. I have them favored in all three maps, and if the model's right, then it's a sweep, right? And I think there's just something about the math that is just maybe you should just focus on that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for me, this is Carolina or nothing, but it's probably a stay away for me. I see some value Carolina map 3. They look good in control last week versus Seattle. I think New York are clearly the superior team in this matchup, but maybe Royal Ravens pull out one map. I could absolutely see that. And if I have to pick one, I'll pick that control. So plus 240 seems like good value. I think I'd rather play that than to cover 1.5 rounds in map 3, just because I think it's very unlikely we'll see invasion. And as we all know, invasion control is very likely to go to round 5. So I could see Carolina losing 3-1 in control if they do lose, or even getting swept. But yeah, I think they could at least compete in map 3, so that's the only spot I see value on. Map 1 on Carolina, maybe, but I don't know. This is more an anti-New York play, I think, than a pro-Carolina play, because although New York did win their one match last week versus Rocker, it was pretty close. It was a 3-1 where that map 1 was decided by 8 points. Minnesota clearly got the better of them in search, which was a surprise because New York has been awesome in search and destroy all year, and Minnesota is not good in search and destroy, so that was a bit surprising. The map 4 hardpoint was somewhat close as well, not nearly as close as map 1, but New York showing some signs of weakness, I think, was more of a takeaway than Carolina losing to Seattle. That match was obviously close as well, but maybe this new Seattle lineup is better than their old one or something like that. So yeah, it's Carolina for me, but not in love with it whatsoever.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. Second match on Friday, another one with a big favorite. Optic minus 2,500 on the money line, minus 2.5 plus 100. 62.5 point favorites in a hard point. One of the bigger spreads we've seen in a hard point. Minus 1.5 rounds favorite in the search, plus 125, and off the board in the map 3 spread. I don't think that's warranted. A UC market, I see some value on Seattle here, especially a minus 138. That's a number where I don't mind throwing something on there, especially in the hard point. Optic was able to beat FaZe in the first hard point, not so much in the second. Obviously, both were close, but I also don't think FaZe is the greatest hard point team of all time either. I think Surge could steal something here. Remember, the other thing you have to think about too is the fact that, and my model's a little bit better at catching this kind of thing, Surge is on the upswing, right? 2 out, like they did a big team change, right? It was RCD's out 0-4, and I think that was that the only change. That was the only change, I think, right? My model is probably able to catch a little bit of that upswing a little faster, so I think it's a good shot there. I like Seattle plus 62.5. That number is insanely large. That's an outrageously massive number for a hard point for a team that's on the up and up against a team. Yeah, it's a top 14, but it's not a particularly dominant top 4 team. So yeah, I a little bit on Seattle there. What's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I'm on the same side as you again with the underdog, which is a little scary because these first three games on Friday are all lopsided affairs, but maybe we think these underdogs can compete somewhat with these top dogs. But yeah, I think Seattle plus 2.5 is a viable play. I would probably rather just put that into map two or the map one spread. Like you mentioned, 62.5 is a huge number to lay. And yeah, I don't know. Hardpoint meta is very different than it has been all year. So to take that kind of volatility, I with 62.5 points, I really like that for Seattle map one. Seattle map two, they've been solid in search and destroy all year, and they got 2 wins in that mode last week. Granted, against not great competition. So yeah, I think Seattle can definitely take out one map on Optic, maybe two, depending on how Hardpoint is going for them. If Seattle are a much improved Hardpoint team, I could absolutely see this going to a map 5. And if it gets there, it's anybody's guess as to who wins. At the end of the day, I expect Optic to win this pretty comfortably, but I think Seattle can pull off at least one map on them for sure. Give me Seattle Surge. I feel like I've said that all year, but yeah, maybe they're finally starting to turn things around with their new roster.
I agree with that. Last match on Friday, Ultra again minus 2,000 on the money line. Either Friday is going to be very boring or very an interesting games. Minus 2.5, minus 110, 47.5 point spread on the hard point, 1.5 round spread in the search, and 1.5 rounds in the control. Again, I see value on Miami here. You see a little bit of value on Miami as well. This one is a bit iffier for me. I don't know. I just don't know exactly how much I feel about the Toronto hard point. I think they're pretty good, but again, if it's they're gonna scrape out like a 25-point win or something, right? I don't know. This one for me is a lot less bettable. I don't love the Miami plus 2.5, but I'm definitely not. I definitely don't like the Ultra minus 2.5 either. Definitely not at minus 110. That number needs to be a lot higher for me to even think about that. And I'm not there for that one. But I'm also not there for Miami plus 2.5 either. What's your take on this?
Yeah, it looks like another Toronto 3-1 to me. That's what they love to do. Last week they did get a sweep against LA Gorillas, but LA Gorillas look like they're going down the drain all of a sudden. And Miami picked up a nice win against Boston. It was pretty close. It was a 3-2 win. They had a round 11, game 2 wins. Very easily could have gone the other way, but Miami still pulled it out. New roster. So far, so good. And yeah, my model really likes Miami map 3 here. That's been Toronto's weakness pretty much all year. Miami aren't great at control, but I can definitely see them competing in that mode with Toronto. And you look at map vetoes, how they might play out, and I think we're very likely going to get an invasion control, which I really like for an underdog because if you can just get that round 5 defense, you're looking really good, assuming you can hold defense the first 2 times you play. Yeah, that's really all I see here. I think Miami could definitely take a hard point if they get lucky. And map 2 is winnable as well. But yeah, your path to victory is pretty limited if you're Miami. It really just looks like a 2-3-5, which we've seen before. That's how Toronto lose when they lose typically. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe if Toronto's hard point is continuing to falter a little, maybe Miami can pick one up there. All roads point to Toronto should win this. But yeah, don't be surprised if Miami make this somewhat competitive. 3 for 3 on the underdogs for me, which is terrifying. But we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. Saturday, Miami versus Thieves. Miami plus 150 on the money line, plus 1.5. 10.5 point underdogs in the hard point, 1.5 round underdogs in the search, and 1.5 round underdogs in the control. Not bad. I like Miami here. Actually, you like Miami a little bit too. There's some value on the plus 1.5. I think where We like Miami a little bit map 1. I like the map 2. You do not like the map 2, but we both the map 3 relative to expectations. Thieves are just such a weird team where I just don't know. Okay, they beat Legion, but Legion is weird that way, where they'll be really good and they'll lose to really bad teams. Miami is, again, just like I have no idea. This team is just all over the place, right? Not winning a map on LAN, going 0-6 on LAN. It's nuts. I don't know. 0-6 in games, and then 0. What are they now? They're 0-12 in maps on LAN. That's nuts as a team. That's just an insane stat. Yeah, I don't know. But that being said, though, if they're onliners, then this game is online. So I'd go with the online here. I'll go with the onliners. What are your thoughts here? Do you also like Miami here as well?
Yeah, absolutely. This is another one where I see value on Heretics. Now, one caveat with this is, again, this is a back-to-back game. We see a lot of these. Miami are the last game on Friday, first game on Saturday, and this will be LA Thieves' first game of the weekend. A few more data points for the Thieves to go off of for map vetoes and whatnot. So maybe Thieves have a bigger advantage than I see here initially. But yeah, Miami are solid. Miami on the year, with the current map set, I believe are above 500 in hardpoint. And that's good. And LA Thieves have been improving in hardpoint ever since their disastrous start. But yeah, I don't see why Miami is a favorite in map 1 or map 4. At the very least, it's a 50-50. And then again, yeah, map 2 and map 3, I give the edge to Thieves, but not non-convincingly. I think those could go either way pretty much as well. So at the end of the day, I see this as a pretty competitive series. I would have Thieves favored, but minus 200 is just way too steep for me. I pretty much see these teams on the same tier, and the pricing seems to indicate that they're not, that LA Thieves are a step above. But I'm not so sure yet, right? Like Miami, I would say LA Thieves had a better week last week than Miami, but we only saw each of these teams once. So there's still a lot to be answered, but that just leads me to liking the underdog in this situation. Give me Miami. Plus 1.5, I'd say, is my preferred way of going about it. I think they could, at the very least, split hard points. Maybe win them both. But if they can split, I just need you to win a search or a control, and I think they're very capable of doing that against a team like Thieves. Yeah, Heretics again in this one.
Yeah, I agree with that. Legion versus Optic. Optic minus 450 on the money line, minus 1.5, minus 188. 27.5 point favorites in the hard point, 1.5 round favorites in the search, and 1.5 round favorites in the control. Yeah, we're basically on market here. I'm a little higher on Legion, not a lot higher. We're a little lower on Optic, but I don't see much here. I think maybe if you want to bet something, I think this is Legion's first game with ASIM. I think you'd go Legion plus 1.5. There might be a little bit of value there, but not a lot. But I also don't like Optic minus 1.5, and I don't think you particularly like it either. Yeah, I got nothing here. What do you have?
Yeah, agree. I think, yeah, if you're going to make a case for one team, it's got to be maybe Legion, just based on the roster change. I think ASIM in the lineup is good, right? Because if ASIM does the things that Purge did well, like Purge, for as much crap as he got, I feel like he played with the team well, right? There was a reason why Legion has been a competitive team so far this year, and Purge has been on the team all year, so he's clearly doing something right. He just, yeah, maybe he lacks that like ability to go off and get a kill streak, where ASIM can give you one of those every now and then, but he still can play fundamentally. So I think Legion improved slightly with that roster change. I do think Optic are a class above for sure, but yeah, it's tough with these prices. I'm not in love with anything really. Everything is about on market for me, so this one is just a pass, but I do expect Legion to come out and be competitive against an Optic team that, you know, didn't have a great week last week. They've only played FaZe, but again, they lost to FaZe, right? Like, they won map 1, then map 2, 3, 4, all losses. Map 4, very close. It was decided by 9 points. But at the end of the day, if you're Optic, like, it's another loss to FaZe. I think there's clearly now, again, like, 2 tiers in the top 4. I think FaZe and Toronto are in that tier above. I think Optic and New York are in that tier below. They're close, right? Optic are a good contender, but still above Vegas Legion by another tier, I would say. So we'll see how it all shakes out. Interested to see how the Legion roster looks with the new lineup, but yeah, I think everything's a pass here, but Legion maybe if the price gets interesting enough.
Yeah, I agree with that. Surge versus Subliners. Last match on Saturday. Subliners minus 2,000 on the money line, minus 2.5 plus 100, 55.5 points. Model the sports books do not think Seattle is very good at hardpoint. 55.5 spread in the hardpoint, 1.5 round spread in the search, and again off the board for the control. Just absolutely wrecked there. You're pretty low on Seattle, at least on map 1 and 3. I give them some life in map 1 and a little in map 2 and a lot more life in map 3. I think there might be some value on the plus 2.5. I feel like, again, but this is Seattle plays Optic and New York, right? So I feel like we'll know if there's any value on Seattle, how depending on how they do against Optic, right? I think there's a play here. It's Seattle. I don't like a subliners play here, and your model definitely doesn't like that either. Do you see anything here or not?
Like we mentioned before, the Seattle hardpoint spreads seem very big, maybe a little too big, just based on what we saw last week and just knowing that the hardpoint meta is much, much different than it has been all year. So I think my numbers on Seattle to win map 1 outright are a little low. I think market is about right, and maybe your model even more. Yeah, Seattle plus 2.5, I don't mind in this situation as well. I believe the price on that is exactly the same as it is in their first match, which makes sense because they play Optic on Friday. They're playing New York on this day. I see those teams as very similar to each other. So, yeah, similar thinking in this one. Seattle plus 2.5. They can absolutely compete in Search and Destroy. We just saw New York falter in that game mode against a not great Rocker team. And Seattle have been consistently good in Search all year, no matter the lineup. If their hardpoint is improving, that is a big up for them. Control is one I feel confident about. Seattle are horrible at that. They have 3 control wins all year. New York, very good control team. So unless the vetoes get crazy in that and Seattle lucks out with a half-decent map, I really think New York control that. But with that being said, I think Seattle are live in map 2, absolutely. I think they're maybe undervalued slightly in map 1 as well, despite what my numbers say. So, again, it's another one where I'm leaning Seattle, and I'm terrified. But yeah, that's just where we're at with these kind of numbers. New York are just, they're priced into oblivion because the books are, I think, scared of people just hammering on New York. So yeah, I lean Seattle once again.
Agreed. All right, Sunday. Carolina versus LAG. Carolina minus 38 on the money line. Plus minus 1.5 plus 125. 17.5 point favorites in the hard point. 1.5 round underdogs actually in the search, and then 1.5 round favorites in the control. Yeah, this is I got nothing. We're basically there's very little variance between any of our things and the model here. Yeah, sometimes that happens. This line is priced right. You have anything to add?
No, this game has very little interest to me as the opening game on Sunday. I guess it's a big game in terms of winners bracket, losers bracket. We saw LAG get their doors blown off last week. My model seems to think there is some value on Gorillas. They have them as the slight favorite in this match. I'm not so sure. This is basically a 50-50 for me. Carolina lost to Seattle last week in what was a somewhat close match. So yeah, I don't really know. I don't really care, and I really don't know who's going to win. It's a hard pass for me as well.
Yep. Boston versus Minnesota. Boston plus 125 on the money line. Minnesota minus 175. Minnesota minus 1.5 plus 150. Minnesota 8.5 point favorites in the hard point. That doesn't sound like a great idea. Minus 1.5 round favorites in the search and 1.5 round favorites in the control, but heavily shaded to basically a tie. And yeah, there's some value on Boston. I like Boston. Your model says nothing. I don't know. I don't love this either. I think this is a very iffy match. I don't like a lot here. You're definitely not going to find me with a Minnesota -1.5 ticket. Yeah, I got nothing. This is another one. This Sunday is a horrible slate for this Sunday. Jeez, it's just not a great Sunday, except for the last game. Last game might be good, but the first two games just not happening there. Do you see anything here?
Yeah, I'm surprised you say there's nothing on this because I don't mind that you're high on Boston. At least your model is high on Boston because, yeah, if I had to pick, I would pick that side. Yeah, both teams not great last week. Both teams searching for their first win for the Major 3 qualifiers. I do think the price on this doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? If we go back a week from right now, Boston is a clear favorite over Miami, and they lose that outright, right? 3-2, very close series. It could have been a Boston sweep if that game 2, round 11, goes in Boston's favor, right? Boston go on to win control 3-0, the butterfly effect. We don't know what happens if that round goes differently, but Boston were really close to winning that series, maybe should have. Minnesota, somewhat competitive against New York, non-competitive versus FaZe. I don't know how that leads from Boston being like a minus whatever they were last week, -150 favorite, to now +125 underdog against a team that I see very similarly as Miami. Minnesota and Miami, to me, are roughly interchangeable in terms of how good they are. And Boston didn't show me that much, and Minnesota didn't show me that much last week to shift those odds this drastically. Yeah, my model says Minnesota is a slight favorite, but I put this as basically a true toss-up. And if that's the case, then yeah, Boston makes some sense. That's the only way I could see going with this. Specifically, map 1 looks somewhat intriguing, but if I were to pick Boston in anything, I would probably just take them straight up money line just to see how well it pays off. So two teams that have roster changes, we saw them so far. It's not so good, but someone's got to come through with a win, and I just don't think this price adjustment is totally justified. So lean Boston, but very much a pass for me.
Yeah. And finally, last but not least, FaZe versus Ultra. FaZe -163 on the money line, -1.5 +150 for the spread. FaZe actually a 6.5 point underdog in the hard point. 1.5 round favorites in the search and 1.5 round favorites in the control. I actually like FaZe here. You're a lot lower. I'm mostly market. I'm basically market. You're lower on FaZe. I actually agree with you. I think Ultra is becoming slightly better than we think. I think there is a lot of recent Toronto not being great, but I think they have definitely turned around. They really did basically shut out LAG there. I kind of Ultra here. If I had to bet something, I bet Ultra here, but I don't really see any angle on this one. As an Ultra fan, I'm just gonna watch this game and sit back and enjoy. Do you see anything here?
Yeah, to me, a few things jump off the page. For sure, Toronto map 1. They're still the best in hardpoint in my opinion. So to put them at -120 with FaZe, right, both teams -120, that doesn't make a ton of sense to me. I do think if we see two hard points, the likeliest outcome is they split them. But if one team is going to win both of them, it's going to be Toronto. They are still the class of hardpoint, despite their recent struggles. The one thing that scares me with that is the hardpoint meta change, but we did see Toronto show a willingness to play one of the new maps. I can't remember which one. They didn't end up playing it because they swept LA, but they left it open. FaZe did play Vista. They won that. They played 6-star. They lost that. A bit of mixed results on the new maps in map 1, but at the end of the day, I just trust Ultra in map 1 quite a bit. And to lay 6.5 points at even money is totally fine with me. That's what I like the most in this, but I definitely see Atlanta map 2 and Atlanta map 3 as valuable. I think every time these teams have squared off, FaZe have won the control, and they've done so convincingly a number of times. So FaZe in map 3, even though it's at minus 163, I don't hate that. If you want to take the minus 1.5 rounds in map 3 at a nice juicy number, I say go ahead. Map 3 is, I would say, what I'm most comfortable with my model, just because that meta has stayed the same all year. And then map 2, yeah, Search and Destroy is slightly different with the new map in, 6-star in. But yeah, I just think Atlanta are better than Toronto in that, clearly. And the market is just maybe a little behind where I like that. Yeah, at the end of the day, I think Atlanta win. I lean Atlanta in a 3-2. So I think Toronto to cover is fair. I think Toronto to win map 1 or map 4 is fair. But I also see some value in Atlanta. So a weird game where we have some mixed values. But yeah, I'm excited to watch this because this is, in my opinion, the number 1 team versus the number 2 team. Whoever wins this has a good shot of going 7-0 in the qualifiers. But even if you lose this, whoever loses is totally fine. They should be a lock for winner's bracket even with a loss here. Yeah, just curious to see if we see those new maps in this series. I suspect we will. And that leads me to the underdog a little bit, just knowing that we have this variance kind of built into the match. So yeah, for me it's Toronto Ultra mostly, but I still expect FaZe to win.
Yeah, I agree with that. Beating the market in combined model plays. I've got Boston moneyline versus Minnesota. I've got Heretics moneyline against Thieves, are just going right in. And I've got Seattle plus 2.5, minus 138 versus Texas. You've got Ultra minus 6.5, map 1 against FaZe. You've got Miami plus 1.5, plus 150 versus Toronto. You've got Miami getting it to around 5 against Toronto. I could see it. And then you've also got Miami plus 1.5, minus 150 versus Thieves. So yeah, some really good, some interesting stuff. We're both on Miami. What could go wrong? And yeah. And combined model planes, we got Carolina map 3 against, I believe they're playing New York. Yeah, they're playing New York. So them in the control. Seattle plus 2.5, map 2. We both like that against Optic, and we like Miami plus 2.5, map 3 against Toronto. They could do it. I don't love the plus 2.5 though. Saturday, Miami just across the board against Thieves. Again, what could possibly go wrong? Legion map 1 against. I don't hate them. I think if you're playing something, you got to play Legion there. Seattle plus 2.5 and map 2. Yep, they could potentially do some damage there against New York. Boston money line plus 1.5, map 1. The plus 1.5 is a little expensive there against Minnesota, but whatever. And then Atlanta map 2, map 3. We see a little bit of value there against Ultra, but not a ton of value either way. So I'd kind of stay away from that one. I'd say, but yeah. Other than that, we will be here next week for week 3, and who knows? Maybe we'll have some more CDL news by then. Who knows? We'll see. All right. See you, everybody. Have a good week, and we will see you next week. Good luck with your bets, and we'll see you next week. Bye.